The Thanksgiving dinner that was supposed to be a celebration turned into the most humiliating moment of my life when my entire family voted me out, but they never expected me to fight back, and now they are watching their lives crumble while I finally live in peace for the first time ever. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time for family, a time to come together, to laugh, to eat, to feel like you belong somewhere. But for me, Thanksgiving became the day I learned that family is not just about blood. It's about who actually stands by you. It was supposed to be a normal dinner. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and cranberry sauce. The clatter of plates, the sound of laughter. It all felt warm, familiar, safe. But it was all a lie. Before we carved the turkey, my sister, Natalie, said, standing up from her chair with that rehearsed, insufferable smirk, "There's something we need to say." I knew that tone. I had heard it my entire life. The tone she used when she framed me for sneaking out as a teenager, the tone she used when she manipulated our parents into believing she was perfect, while I was just a bitter shadow in the background. The room fell silent. "We had a family vote," she announced, looking around like she had just won an election. "And we've decided, you're not family anymore." There was laughter.
Cheers.
My cousin Laura clapped like she was at a concert. My Uncle Mitch raised his wine glass in a toast. Even my own mother chuckled and said, "Well, someone had to say it." I stared at them, my fork frozen midair. I searched the room for my father, my last hope for reason.
He didn't even look at me.
He just took a sip of his beer and muttered, "It's probably for the best." I felt my entire body go cold. "Wow," I whispered, pushing my chair back slowly. "You guys actually rehearsed this." Natalie beamed, proud of herself. "You've been toxic for years. We're just finally done pretending." "You're not family," my mother added casually, as if she were discussing the weather. "It's unanimous." Silence. No one spoke up for me. Not one person. I inhaled sharply, my chest burning with the weight of betrayal. Then I exhaled and smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Good," I said softly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder, placing it right in the middle of the table. The sound it made cut through the laughter like a blade. "What is that?" Natalie scoffed, still full of herself. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Why don't you find out?" She grabbed it, still smirking. She was so sure she had won. Then she turned the first page, and her face drained of color. Her smirk disappeared. Her eyes widened. She flipped to the next page, then the next, and then she screamed, a blood-curdling, horror movie kind of scream. The folder slipped from her fingers, pages scattering across the table. She pushed her chair back, so violently it fell over. "You monster," she shrieked. "You're a sick, twisted freak." Gasps filled the room. Joel, her husband, snatched up the folder and read the documents. His jaw clenched. "Is this?" he stammered, looking at me. I nodded. "It's all real. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every single instance where I had financially bailed them out. $78,000 over the years.
$878,000.
I paid for my father's back surgery. I covered my mother's mortgage when she was a month away from losing the house. I sent money for Natalie's dental emergency, only to find out later she had used it for cosmetic veneers. I had spent my entire adult life funding their selfishness, believing, stupidly, that this was what family did. That if I gave enough, if I helped enough, if I sacrificed enough, they would love me. But they never loved me. They loved what I gave them. And the moment I stopped giving, I became disposable. I watched as the reality of it all sank in. My mother looked pale. My father, for the first time, looked guilty. You kept records?" my mother whispered. I turned to her, my voice even. "You never remembered. So someone had to." Natalie's face contorted with rage. "This is a violation," she screeched. "You had no right to." "No right." I cut in, my voice sharp. "You just stood here, in front of this entire family, and told me I wasn't one of you. And now, you're mad because I came prepared?" Joel was still flipping through the pages, his face growing darker by the second. His hands trembled as he read something that made his entire body tense. "What's this about Santa Monica?" he asked quietly, his voice tight. Natalie froze. His grip on the folder tightened. "Who's Alyssa?" Silence. "You were at a hotel for 3 nights on my credit card," he said, his voice rising.
Who is
"Alyssa?" Natalie's mouth opened, then closed. She had no comeback. The weight of her own lies crushed her. My mother tried to salvage the moment, her voice trembling. "Listen, honey, we may have overreacted, but this is still family. Families fight. We can fix this." I exhaled, slow and deep. "You're not listening," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I'm not asking for peace. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm telling you I'm done." Natalie scoffed. "Oh, stop pretending this is some big moment. You've said that before." I met her gaze, steady. "Not like this." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. My father, still shaken, grabbed it before Natalie could. He opened it. His eyes scanned the document. What is this?" he whispered. I answered for him. "Power of attorney? Revoked. Medical proxy? Revoked. Emergency contact? Removed. I've already signed the papers. I am legally, financially, and emotionally no longer responsible for any of you."
My mother gasped.
"You're cutting ties completely?" "Completely," I said. "Starting now." "You're being selfish," she cried, tears forming. "We made mistakes, but we're still your family." I turned to her, my voice cold.
"No."
"You're not." I grabbed my coat, looked at them one last time, and walked out the door, leaving them to their Thanksgiving dinner, cold food, empty plates, and the truth they could no longer ignore. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I walked out of that house, leaving them stunned, their perfect little betrayal crumbling before their eyes. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt powerful. But all I felt was empty. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, not from regret, but from years of repressed anger finally boiling over. I stood by my car for a long time, my breath fogging in the winter night, my heart pounding in my ears. I told myself I wouldn't cry, but grief has a cruel way of sneaking up on you. Because as much as I hated them, as much as I wanted to cut them off, it still hurt. I had spent years telling myself that if I just worked harder, if I was more successful, if I gave more, they would love me the way I had always loved them. That someday, my mother would look at me with pride instead of indifference. That my father would finally defend me instead of turning a blind eye. That Natalie would see me as a brother, not just an ATM. But I was never family to them. I was a resource, a safety net, a bank account. And now that I was gone, they were going to feel what it was like to be without me. I turned off my phone that night. I didn't want to deal with the inevitable flood of calls and messages. I didn't want to hear my mother's fake concern, Natalie's shrieking justifications, my father's half-hearted attempts to smooth things over. But the next morning, reality hit. They didn't think I was serious. The flood of manipulation begins. The first message came from my mother. "Mom, sweetheart, I know we got a little heated last night. It was just a misunderstanding. Come over for coffee, and we'll talk it out like a family." I deleted it without responding. Then Natalie's text came through. "Natalie, you're acting like a spoiled brat. You embarrass me in front of my entire family. You think you're so clever with your little receipts, but guess what? You're still alone, and we're still family. And when you come crawling back, I won't forgive you." I blocked her. Then my father finally reached out.
"Dad, you went too far."
"We all said things we didn't mean. But your mother is really upset.
Fix this."
It's time to be reasonable." Reasonable. That was his favorite word. Being reasonable meant ignoring how they had treated me. Being reasonable meant keeping the peace at my own expense. Being reasonable meant continuing to be their financial safety net while they treated me like garbage. I had spent my entire life being reasonable.
So I didn't respond.
Then the real desperation set in. A week passed. Then 2. The silence grew louder. I expected them to move on, to let me go. but I underestimated how much they had depended on me. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Hi, Daniel. It's Laura. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I didn't know. About the money. About what you've done for this family. I just followed the crowd. I just wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to write her off, just like I had written off the rest of them. But another part of me, the part that had always longed for even a sliver of acknowledgement, felt something crack inside. It didn't make up for what had happened. But it was the first time anyone in that family had admitted I wasn't the villain. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. But then the next morning, another text came through. This time from my father. Dad, your mother isn't well.
She's not eating.
She keeps crying. She says she's losing her son. Can you just come over and talk? One last time?
Guilt.
They knew exactly where to hit me. For years, they had used my love against me, knowing that I would always cave if they made me feel like I was hurting them by standing up for myself. I almost fell for it. Almost. But then I remembered, this was the same mother who had laughed at my humiliation, who had cheered when my sister declared that I was no longer family, who had reached for the cranberry sauce while she discarded me like trash. I clenched my jaw, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. And then I typed the words I never thought I'd have the strength to say. Me. She lost her son a long time ago. She just never noticed until now. And then I blocked his number. The final attempt to reel me back in. By Christmas, I thought they had finally given up. But then, on December 23rd, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was from my mother. It was 3 pages long. The first page was filled with guilt. We said things we didn't mean. We were angry. But you've always been the strong one. The one who held us together. We didn't realize how much we needed you until you were gone. The second page was filled with manipulation. Your father isn't doing well. He's barely eating. Natalie is struggling. The family is falling apart without you. You don't have to forgive us, but can't you just come home for Christmas? Just for one night. And the third page. The third page was the real reason she had written. We're selling the house, but we're underwater on the mortgage. We just need a little help to get through this. And then we'll never ask again. Please, Daniel. Do it for the family. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, feeling the weight of years of manipulation pressing down on my chest. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could do for them. They didn't love me. They loved my money. I folded the letter, walked to the kitchen, and without hesitation, I threw it in the trash. The moment I finally let go. That night, for the first time in years, I sat alone by the fire, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the flames flicker. No family. No guilt. No obligation. Just silence. And for the first time, I realized silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. They could call, they could beg, they could send as many letters as they wanted. But I was done. And this time, I meant it.